Okay, Liz, we're live now.
Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. Welcome everyone to the Algonquin Highlands Committee of Adjustment and our meeting of February the 26th. This is a public meeting to consider development proposals that don't comply with the provisions of the Township's comprehensive zoning bylaw. The planner will provide a brief overview of the application, after which the applicant or their agent will have an opportunity to address the committee. Following this, anyone who wishes to speak either for or against the application will be given an opportunity to do so. The committee will then discuss the proposal and be given an opportunity to ask questions about the application, after which the committee will vote to either grant, refuse, or defer the proposal. I'd like to introduce the committee, starting with myself, Liz Danielson. I'm the chair of the committee and your deputy mayor. We have Chris Woods, member of the public, John Rogers, member of the public, Gary Trapp, member of the public, Julia Shortreed, member of council. We also have Sean O'Callaghan, who is our planner, and Greg Moore with us, who is our interim CBO. Is there any declaration of pecuniary interest or general nature thereof? Okay, hearing none. Could I have a mover and a seconder to adopt the minutes of January 29th? Gary Trapp, Julia Shortreed.
Moved by Gary Trapp, second by Julia Shortreed. Be it resolved, the Committee of Adjustment hereby approves as circulated the meeting minutes of January 29th, 2021. John Rogers, yea or nay?
Yay.
Julia Shortreed, yea or nay?
Yay.
Gary Trapp, yea or nay?
Yay.
Chris Woods, yea or nay?
Yay.
And Liz Danielson, yea or nay?
Yay.
That's carried.
Okay, we have no business arising from the minutes, and we have only one application under new business. And that's the application on Wolf Circle by Webb. This is an application that we heard at the last meeting. So there's some new information, a few changes. I would ask Sean if you would review the application and maybe while you're doing that, highlight specific changes from the last time this came before us.
Certainly. So, and just to clarify, excuse me, just to clarify, this is a new application, not one that was previously deferred, but this similar application was presented to the committee before. So this property is located at 1047 Wolf Circle. The subject lands are zoned shoreline residential 2 and designated waterfront under the official plan. The lands are approximately 0.65 acres in area with 31.4 meters of frontage on Quagma Lake. The surrounding uses are generally shoreline residential, and the lands are currently developed with a detached garage. The owner is proposing to construct a 1,680 square foot, one-story dwelling. This property was subject to minor variance application AHMV 2120, which was to seek relief from Table 2 of the zoning bylaw to permit a reduction in the required setback from the high water mark from 30 meters to 22.86 meters for the purpose of constructing a 1,900 square foot two-story dwelling. This application was refused by the committee at its regular meeting of September 25th, 2020. The applicant has now submitted a new application with an increased proposed setback and a reduced building area from the original application. Existing and proposed site infrastructure and an existing hydro line running through the property significantly limit the available building envelope on the property. The lot is well vegetated, creating an effective natural buffer between the proposed building footprint and the water, as well as to adjacent property owners. The proposed building location is on a plateau of land that would accommodate the proposed building without significant site alterations. The proposed location would also allow for the septic system to be located behind the dwelling, resulting in an increased setback from the water. So the following minor variance is being requested, and that is to reduce the setback from the high water mark from 30 meters 22 to 23.16 meters for the purpose of constructing sorry, I just want to get the numbers correct. Yes, so from table 2 of the zoning bylaw to permit a reduction in the required setback from the high water mark from 30 meters to 23.16 meters for the purpose of constructing a 1,680 square foot, 1-story dwelling, a variance of 6.84 meters. Notice of the application was posted on the property, posted on the township website, and circulated to property owners within 60 meters of the subject lands, as well as to the Quagma Lake Property Owners Association. One objection has been received and 6 letters of support have been received. If the chair wishes, I could read the letters, but those have been circulated to the committee members.
What's the committee's desire with respect to that? You've read the letters in your email. Is that sufficient? Or would you like
Madam
to-
Chair, we've read them. I don't think we need to hear them from Sean.
I agree.
Okay.
I agree.
Carry on.
Yes, so staff are recommending approval of the proposed minor variance with 3 conditions. 1, confirmation be provided from an Ontario land surveyor that the proposed structure is not located closer than 23.16 meters from the high water mark prior to any clearing, site alteration, or the issuance of a building permit. 2, that any on-site sewage system permits and reviews required by the township have been obtained and approved prior to the issuance of a building permit. And 3, that appropriate construction mitigation measures be implemented, which shall include the erection and maintenance of silt fencing between the proposed building and the shoreline.
And you're done?
Yes.
Okay, I know this varies a little bit from the from how we followed through with applications before, but it does go along with what I just read out as our process. So I think that we would hear now from the applicant to hear what he's got to say, and anyone else who wants to speak to us, and then we will ask questions of either Sean or the applicant based on any concerns that we've got.
Yes.
Sorry, I cut out there for a second. I think you were beginning to say that I could have a chance to speak, or did I misinterpret that?
No, you did not.
Okay.
Welcome, Mr. Webb. If you want to provide information or make any arguments you'd like to make at this time, we would hear that.
Perfect. So my first words, I guess, is just a question to the committee. In my original application, I had a consultant take my request, and in doing so, I had to sign an authorization for him to represent me as the owner of the lot. So I'm just asking the committee that if there is an objector, which I think that you said there was, is it required that that person or anyone representing them has a signed authorization from the owner? In other words, can a tenant of the building oppose the variance?
That's a good question, Mr. Webb. I would almost think it should be the property owner, but I would look to Sean for clarification on that.
So any member of the public can oppose an application. Notices are provided on our website, mailed out to property owners. So there's no requirement to be a property owner adjacent to a property to submit an objection.
Perfect. Thanks, Sean. Okay, so I'd like to just state that over the years, there's never been any issues with the owners of any properties in the area. I have not had any open dialogue with the owners, Mary and Jean Bednars, with respect to the variance. My request, as stated in my notes to the committee, tries to show that the location adheres to the characteristics of this largely developed shoreline, and that I am the last of the buildings to fit in. Also, it creates no sightline visually or physically to any of my neighbors. Because of the yellow notification sign, several direct neighbors and owners in the area have come by and walked the lot. Everyone to an individual has been in complete agreement with my proposed building location and has indicated to me that the building and the slope is the obvious location. No one sees how it could negatively impact any neighbor. In submitted notes to the committee, I've tried to clarify my points, and I felt this was critical to bring up the points from the original application of Mr. Bednar's reasoning for the objection that criticized my methods and that he wanted to keep the lake nice. I want to emphasize that the existing garage on my neighbor's property was not placed as per permit, and in fact, does have a significant impact on my sight lines. It does not meet the characteristics of my cottage location if built at 30 meters. I know you guys have already mentioned this, but I did understand that there were several letters of support from my neighbors. Lastly, I just want to highlight how my proposed site plan meets the various tests as outlined under section 45(1) of the Planning Act. First, does the application speak to the intent of the official plan of the township? For example, is the application considerate of the surrounding environment, both natural and man-made? So speaking of natural, it does fit into the natural flow of the land and doesn't just sit on the land. The benefits of both the septic proposal and the significant reduction in removed earth have been addressed pretty clearly in my proposal. As for man-made, it is out of sight lines and adheres to the characteristics of the neighborhood. Second, if the application considered minor in nature, for example, how does it impact the area neighborhood? Again, this is what the neighbors prefer. How does it impact the subject land? Again, there will be less impact to the land as indicated in my proposal. And third and final, is the application appropriate? For example, is the application in keeping with the area? Clearly, with all those hundreds of developed properties, it clearly keeps with that area. Does it permit development that is good for the township? Yes. Increases tax revenue, increases the value of the neighborhood. Does the variance allow proper use of the property? Yes. It matches the extensive Bamaba shoreline development and makes much better use of all aspects of my lot, in particular the back lot. So that's it. If the committee has any questions for me, I certainly feel like I don't need to go through my submission to you, but if you have any questions, feel free and I'll be happy to answer them the best I can.
I think we would ask that if there is anyone else here who wishes to speak to the application, either for or against, if they wish to speak, that they do so now. I'm sorry, sir, you're on mute.
There we go. Dave Webb, and yes, I would like to speak to the application.
Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead. Okay. You have my letter of support in hand. Just a couple of comments, generally speaking. Okay. When we purchased 1035 Will Circle, we had the option to buy either 1035 or 1047. Had we chosen 1047, we would not be here today. I imagine that in 1977, when I bought, or 2019, when Paul bought, a cottage on this lot would not have been a problem, as the objector or family could have purchased it. It is not reasonable to think that the lot would be left vacant. Recall my note on the likelihood of this lot being purchased by Water Access Group and what would have happened. I know that all direct neighbors, approximately 6 of 1047, excluding objector, are in complete agreement to the variance request and feel that the shoreline and building location should be consistent to the area. at the requested location of
I'm sorry, Mr. Webb, but you appear to be frozen.
there were no objections. Although I do not recall it was created for a second living unit. I ask how a request for 76-foot setback could possibly be objectionable. There is no rational reasoning other than the me generation. I am the neighbor abutting 1047 on the south side. My concerns want the new cottage located as per the variance request, thus in keeping with the area and surrounding proper use of the property. In particular, the rear lot, as noted in my support letter. My weight in this matter carries as much consideration as any objection. I would point out that a cottage at 100 feet would form a line of buildings. My cabin, the new cottage, and the Bednar's garage. This equates to approximately 96 feet of buildings and approximately 50 feet of green space. The aesthetics and character would not fit in. I feel strongly that a cottage is 76 feet
Unfortunately, your sound is not coming through, Mr. Webb. We heard most of it, but there was a couple of gaps in what you said towards the end.
Can you hear me right now?
Yes.
Okay. Basically, at the end, when I talked about my concerns, the part about my cabin and the cottage and the Bednar's garage lining up. Did you hear that portion?
Yes.
Okay, and that's, like I said, it equates to about 96 feet of buildings all in a row and only leaving about 50 feet of green space. So following that, I just said the aesthetics and character would not fit in. And I just said, I feel strongly that a cottage at 76 feet allows for the best use of the property and my visuals. And if you have any questions, you have my letter of support in hand. And I think there is some things that bear to this request. Thanks.
Thanks, Mr. Webb. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in favor of the application?
Yes. So
Okay, if you could identify yourself and go
yes,
ahead.
my name is Marcia McCann, and I own the cottage at 1025 Wolf Circle. So I'm the next door neighbor to Dave Webb. And I won't go into any long-winded explanation. I have already submitted my my letter in supporting the application, and I feel strongly enough about it that I've taken time from work to be here should you have any questions that you would like to ask. And that's all I have to say for now.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in favor of the application? Is there anyone who wishes to speak in opposition of the application?
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, my name is Shaylin Costello. I'm a planner for Marie Poirier Planning and Associates. May I speak?
Yes, absolutely.
Great, thank you. Today I'll be speaking on behalf of Andy Bednar's, whose family has owned 1057 Wolf Circle since the 1960s. As you know, the relief being sought in this application is the reduced setback of 76 feet in lieu of the required 98.4 feet from the high water mark. This is a near 23-foot difference from the provision of the zoning bylaw, which in our planning opinion, we do not consider minor. The previous application, as you know, was denied on the basis that it did not satisfy the 4-part test for a minor variance. Since then, the setback variance was reduced from the originally requested by only approximately 1 foot, Therefore, we do not feel that this is sufficient to resolve the issues that were presented by the first application. Although the dwelling is going to be reduced from 2 stories to 1, the issue at hand is the proximity to the lake. Therefore, this change will make little difference in terms of mitigating overall environmental and visual impacts to the lake. We do not believe these changes sufficiently address the failure to satisfy the 4-part test for a minor variance since the previous application. Section 4.3.1.2 of the official plan states that development, including septic system, leaching beds, and site alteration will be set back from all watercourses within the township in order to protect natural features and functions of the watercourse, provide riparian habitat, and minimize the risk to public safety and property. In general, development and site alterations should be set back a minimum of 30 meters from the high water mark of lakes, rivers, and streams. And in cases where these setbacks are not achievable, the greatest setback possible will be required. However, in the case of this property, the 30-meter setback is achievable. The property's depth is approximately 78 meters, and with the front yard setback being 30 meters and the rear setback being 12 meters, and the proposed length of the cottage being 13.4 meters, this is altogether only 55.4 meters, which means that the property's depth is sufficient to satisfy that setback requirement from the high water mark. There are no steep slopes on the property, and the existing building envelope is cleared of trees, while the proposed location is not and will require the removal of adult trees on the property. This is substantiated by the renderings Mr. Bednarz had demonstrated at the previous meeting. The building within the building envelope is suitable and appropriate development for the property, and therefore the proposed location for the dwelling is not desirable development for the property. To reiterate, the setback variance in question is nearly 23 feet difference from the requirement of the zoning bylaw, which in our planning opinion is not minor whatsoever. The proposed setback deficiency will adversely impact the water quality and the overall health of the lake. Kewagama Lake is identified as a cold water lake, which is nearing development capacity. Section 4.2.5.5.2 says that council recognizes the importance of cold water lakes and streams in the township. Therefore, development shall only take place in a manner which does not adversely impact the habitat essential to the maintenance of healthy cold water fishery. To permit such a reduced setback from the water is to disregard these official plan policies. Furthermore, Kewagama Lake is nearing development capacity. Official plan section 4.2.5.5.6 states that lakes that are moderately sensitive to development are nearing development capacity in terms of water quality may require further detailed studies prior to approval of a development application. Council shall consult with the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry and the Ministry of the Environment and Climate Change as part of the development approval process to determine the appropriateness of the development proposed and the need for the proponent to undertake an environmental impact study. Based on these policies, impacts to lake trout lakes that are nearing capacity should be mitigated in any way possible. And since the property is suitable to be developed behind these setbacks of the high water mark, special regard should be taken in order to maintain the health and quality of the lake. Waterfront policies in the Algonquin Highlands official plans further substantiate this. Section 5.2.6.13 identifies situations where a lesser setback from the high water mark may be permitted. Notably of which, and as identified in the staff report, was it's not physically possible due to terrain or lot depth features to meet the required setback on the existing vacant lot of record. However, this application doesn't satisfy any of these reasons of the official plan for a lesser setback on the waterfront, and therefore allowing this minor variance to be granted will not be in conformity with the general intent and purpose of the official plan. Therefore, to reiterate, our reasons for opposing this application are as follows. The initial application was heard and was denied by committee on the basis that it did not meet the 4-part test for a minor variance. And this application has only reduced its requested relief from the setback requirement by approximately 1 foot since the previous application. Therefore, it has not sufficiently changed to satisfy the test of a minor variance. A nearly 23-foot variance from the provision of the bylaw is not minor in nature in our planning opinion. The reduced setback will have adverse impacts to the quality of the lake, aesthetics, and health of the lake, which is nearing development capacity and is sensitive to development. By building in compliance with the 30-meter setback requirement, the water quality will be preserved, the character of the waterfront will be maintained, and the adult trees on the property will not need to be removed. Official plan policies iterate that reduced setbacks may only be permitted when the required setback is not achievable due to environmental or physical constraints. However, based on the property's depth and building envelope, it is in fact possible to comply with the setback provisions. Based on the review of relevant policies pertaining to this property, namely the Algonquin Highlands official plan, there are clear policies which state situations where lesser setbacks from the high water mark may be permitted. However, this is not one of them. The application is not a minor variance from the zoning bylaw, nor has the application been sufficiently amended to reflect and address the concerns raised from the previous application, which was denied. In order to protect the health and aesthetics along the waterfront of Kawagama Lake, setbacks requirements should be met whenever possible. It is our hope that you hear and recognize these concerns with this application. And respectfully, we do not believe this application meets the 4-part test for a minor variance. Thank you, committee.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in opposition to the application? Anyone else who wishes to speak to the application? Okay, at this time, I would look to committee members to ask any questions that they might have of either Mr. Webb or any of the people who wanted to speak to the application. Questions? Mr. Rogers.
Through you, Madam Chair, maybe probably to Mr. Webb. I'm looking at the site plan or drawing that you've done. I don't see on that sketch where the hydro line is. It's been mentioned that there's a hydro line running through the property. I cannot remember from my site visit where that hydro line might be. Could you, and this is Paul Webb, sorry, not Dave Webb, Paul Webb, could you just perhaps try to describe to me where it is in relation to the building?
Yeah, certainly. So essentially the hydro line, basically, if you look at the site plan, the hydro line is basically at the back of my lot. So if you see that picture, the back of the lot is the hydro plan. So there's a hydro setback that you have to build in front of. That was one of the things we talked about the last variance, and that was Andy had suggested building around that 150, and I think Shaylin's kind of saying the same thing. But what happens at that point, because of how narrow the lot is all the septic ends up flowing towards the lake, because you obviously can't have your septic flowing. You can't, with the hydro setback, you can't be in that space. So Shaylin makes some really great points about the environment, and that's one of the big considerations. And my other drawing indicates that by building at 76, my septic bed starts at 150 feet and continues further away. And so to Shaylin's point, I think that would be much more environmentally sensitive than having it end in a downslope at 86 feet and even closer to my neighbor's my neighbor's well.
What's the setback that hydro requires?
We talked about it last time, and I believe it was, and don't quote me on this, 3 meters, something like that.
If Sean could maybe respond to that question.
Yes, so from a hydro line, it's a 4.5 meter setback requirement.
Okay. Thank you. I also have a question to Ms. Costello. you said you didn't think this was minor. Could you tell me what you think is minor? A definition of minor?
I mean, that is sort of subjective and would vary from property to property. But I mean, looking at this property, I would say a variance would be around 10 feet at the most. You know, from looking at the zoning bylaw, there are situations where a lesser setback was permitted in the shoreline residential areas. That was, you know, a similar reduction from the setback. However, they were addressed in zoning bylaw amendments because simply they don't meet the 4-part tests of a minor variance and need to be looked at more comprehensively and with more studies involved to make sure that reducing those setbacks from the high water mark, which, you know, a 23-foot reduction from the setback, I believe is very substantial. It's not minor. Therefore, there are other planning tools in place which could better address and ensure that those environmental impacts are minimized wherever possible.
So, I have to say, my definition of minor, I've been involved in minor variance applications where 100% variance has been deemed to be minor. So, and I'm sure you're aware that there are a lot of cases that are saying that it's not the numbers, it's the type of application and the impact on the community and the area. One of the things, again, I'd like to have your thoughts on this, but it seems to me that Mr. Webb has very nicely tried to put this building coming into the slope of the property, that he's building into the slope, so that there isn't as significant an impact. If you put it back where your client wants it, there's going to be a much higher building structure coming out of the ground because it can't build into the edge of the property. It's a gentle slope, but it's an ideal slope. I think the location is to my mind, is an ideal location to put this building. But I'd just like to have your comments about why you think it would be less impact of putting something higher and having a bigger impact on the height of the structure.
Are there other questions that the committee members would like to ask of any of the members present or people present?
I'd like to hear the answer to that question that John just asked of the objection.
Well, my apologies. I thought that John was finished. I know that the definition of a minor variance is something that can be pretty gray, and there's so many different circumstances surrounding each different application, depending on the topography, the size of the lot, what's been built there before. So it's hard to pin down precisely what is a minor variance. But if you wish to respond to that, Ms. Costello.
Excuse me, Madam Chair. I think the question was, if you moved it back and it was now raised, would that not have more of an environmental or an effect on the area being raised? And I'd like to hear her answer to that part of it.
Yeah, I won't speak directly to what the outcome would be if the dwelling was exactly at the 30-meter mark. I haven't personally been to the property. However, I will say, just speaking on the basis of the 4-part test of a minor variance, I don't believe that the reduction of the setback is minor. And, you know, as I stated, there are multiple official plan policies where the greatest setback achievable must be maintained. And so therefore, I don't believe it satisfies the general intent and purpose of the official plan. I don't believe it's minor in nature, and I don't have anything additional to add at this time.
Okay, Other, does that response sufficient for you, Mr. Woods?
She responded the way she responded. That's fine. Thank you.
So do we have other questions from the committee for either Sean or the applicant?
I do, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
I'd like to ask Mr. Webb on his drawing where he talks about the septic being at the back of the property near the hydro line. And if it was moved back to the 30-foot or 30-meter requirement, you would have to move the septic to the front. My question is, why do you have to move it to the front?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. No, it wasn't if it was at 30 meters. What I was trying to sort of point out in my description was last time it was suggested by Mr. Bednarz and I believe one or two committee members that building at around 150 feet seemed like a plausible spot to build. And so what my drawings represent is that if it was at 150 feet, there would be no room for a septic at the back. It would have to then go to the front of the property. And that's where the septic bed ended at about 86 feet. At the 30 meters mark, my point was the other flip side of you might say, well, then why not just build at 30 feet? And the environmental impact, one, is you're ending up to remove more soil. And two, I know Mr. Rogers just mentioned this, was your essentially the height of your building increases. Aesthetically, I think you stick out a lot more than you would building into the lot at that 76-foot mark. And it might be a chance for me to mention too, I know you guys have already read about the trees, but Shaylin, just to clarify to you, the first row of trees there, I know you said you hadn't been at the lot, actually is at 102 feet. So those trees would come down regardless. And the next row sits around 93, which is where your deck would be. And if you were excavating that much at 30 meters, you'd certainly be damaging roots. So by building at 76, and I know I mentioned this in my report, there would not be a single extra tree removed as opposed to building at third. So just to clarify, if that helps.
That raises a specific question for me about removal of trees. It was my understanding from having looked at the property that what you're talking about is removal of the trees that you've planted. Is that correct?
No, so the removal, I've planted about 30 trees, some on the property. I've even planted a whole bunch beyond the hydro line. If you can sort of recall being in there, probably planted 20 or so even behind the lot line, and then some further from. So the removal of the trees would be existing trees that are on the lot that would be removed, like I said, regardless if building at 76 feet. Sorry, I keep going back to feet. 76 feet or 100 feet would make no difference to those existing trees that would be removed.
Because it's my understanding that if you built in the location that you're proposing, that there's a number of mature large trees that need to come down on the bank.
You're correct. And that's sort of what I'm saying. Whether I build at 100 or 76, the exact same number of mature large trees would be removed. And that being that at about the 102 feet mark, there's about 4 trees that go across the lot, pretty much, perpendicular to the front and back lot line, parallel to the front and back lot line. So those would be in the cottage. So those would obviously be removed. And then the ones that are just directly in front of them that are then in that slope would also be removed regardless of building at 100 feet or at 76, because they're not farther enough towards the lake. And I do want to, just for the whole committee, environmental stuff is key to me. I've spent hours and hours and hours walking through the lot, staking out spots, moving it here, thinking about septics, thinking about the neighbors. it's not, I guess what I'm saying is I want you guys to know that I have considered all those things that you're mentioning.
Are there other questions or comments that the committee would like to make?
Again, I'd like to ask Mr. Webb, on your second application, you have indicated moving the garage, and maybe it looks like it's been moved significantly back. Is that correct?
Yes, it hasn't been moved. It's been staked out. The contractor's been hired. A down payment's been paid. It's not something I really wanted to do, which was why I was sort of hoping that original application would go through. There was suggestion that the garage was appeared to look like a tear down and wouldn't sort of require a whole lot of work to move. And unfortunately, I think you guys might remember me saying it's easier to say when it's not coming out of your pocketbook, but I was certainly shocked when I saw the just over $13,000 quote for that. So yes, it's being removed as sort of per request, not request, but as suggestion by the committee, if I wanted to sort of be building up at that 175 foot, whatever happened it to be spot. So it hasn't been removed, but it is getting removed, pushed back. If you want to know a specific number, I think in the site plan, I said about 150 feet from the water, where it sits probably at about 105-ish or so now.
My interest is more from a standpoint is now the drawing overshadows that garage. Is that because the design was changed? The
design has, yeah, I've paid, I hired Harley Folds to make once the request was denied, we hired a designer to design our cottage. So the plan was to have it designed, I don't know if you can remember, sort of in that L shape. Yeah, so it's now sort of a rectangular. The L shape wasn't my preferred choice. I was doing that, just to kind of make it work around that existing garage.
And if you were to move it back 100 feet or the 30 meters,
the cottage, yes.
Would you be able to put the septic towards the hydro line?
If at 30 meters, yes, you could put, and that was sort of one of the things I wrote about as well. Yes, it would still fit between the cottage and the septic, and the hydro line. But you would be removing, like you guys will have it in your notes, a significant amount of extra earth. And so again, goes back to the point was environmentally, you're having a bigger impact, and aesthetically, you're having a bigger impact to a mature neighborhood. You're going to be that cottage that is sticking out above everything and back from everything, as opposed to fitting into the landscape.
Okay.
Any other questions, Mr.
Thanks,
Witz?
Chris.
Any other questions, Chris?
Sorry, no, I have no more questions at this point.
Okay, other committee members, questions, comments?
Gary Trapp here.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no questions. The questions I had have been asked by Chris and John. Just a comment though, it certainly seems that we have two very different views of meeting the 4-part test for the planning. As I recall, at least my thoughts last time on the first application, when you first look at the lot, it seems like there's, maybe there's other alternatives. And what I was looking for personally, I can't speak for anybody else, was a little more thought around some of the alternatives. And I think Mr. Webb has more than demonstrated that he's considered lots of different options and alternatives, to the point of even willingness to downsize and move his garage and so on. So I'm definitely more comfortable with the application now. And back to the original comments, minor is such a hard thing. We've wrestled with since there is no definition of minor variance. So I'm pleased to see that more alternatives and all the factors have been considered. So that's just a comment. One other comment that I'll make, just again on behalf of myself only as a public member, and not to get in any discussion, but I just kind of wanted to reassure Mr. Webb that while objection letters and support letters are taken seriously, I mean, I look at those in terms of what the content is from a planning and bylaw perspective. And I think there was, again, not to get into it, but there was some suggestion that maybe there was undue weight put on the objection letter. And I just wanted to reassure Mr. Webb that personally, I don't put any more weight on objection letters, or you have a number of letters in favor. We look at or at least I'm sure we all do, we look at the content of the letters and the planning and the bylaws and so on. So it's not just, not just opinions. But anyways, thank you for the extra work that you've put into it and laying it out in detail.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Gary.
Julie, do you have any questions or comments that you'd like to make?
I'm good. My questions were covered. Thank you.
Okay. From my perspective, I've got to say, Mr. Webb, that you might have sensed from me at the earlier meeting that I had some difficulty with this application, and quite honestly, I still do. And primarily from my perspective, it's the fact that this isn't a replacement building. This is a new building that you're putting in. And, we have a requirement for a 30-meter setback for new development. And I think that you will see that Algonquin Highlands over time will become more stringent about that. I know that you've spent a lot of time looking at this and trying to, as Gary said, look at all your different alternatives and possibilities to make it work. And you've made some really heartfelt arguments. I can see that. My concern is that some of the arguments that you make, although reasonable in a way, are not necessarily planning specific. And that's sort of one of the things that we should be looking at. The one thing that that I can't agree with respect to this new application is the argument about the amount of excavation that's required. I can see the point that you're making, and it quite well actually in your sketch, how much more excavation would be required the further back you go, and that there is an environmental impact to that. I don't know how that weighs out against proximity to the water. I really don't, but I'm getting a sense that you, I probably shouldn't say, I might be the only holdout here, and I might not even be that. I'm looking to see if there's any more comments or questions. I was concerned at first by your notes. It looked to me like you were suggesting that if you moved the house further back, that the septic would have to go in front of it on the water side. And that argument I just couldn't accept. I think that there's sufficient room for you to have your septic behind the house, between the house and the power line. But I'm concerned a little bit about the amount of excavation that would be required if you were to have to change. So any more comments or questions? I just want to give everybody one last chance. And we would ask Sean to maybe read the resolution and see where we land.
Okay, so I do have.
I'm
Sorry,
sorry.
Madam Chair, don't we have to have somebody move it? And I'd be happy to move the resolution.
Okay.
As
And is there a seconder?
I will second, Gary.
Okay.
Moved by John Rogers, seconded by Gary Trapp, be it resolved, the Committee of Adjustment hereby approves minor variance application AHMB 2820 submitted by Webb to seek relief from Table 2 of the zoning bylaw to permit a reduction in the required setback from the high water mark from 30 meters to 23.16 meters for the purpose of constructing a 1,680 square foot, one-story dwelling. subject to the following conditions. One, confirmation be provided from an Ontario land surveyor that the proposed structure is not located closer than 23.16 meters from the high water mark prior to any clearing or site alteration or the issuance of a building permit. Two, that any on-site sewage system permits and reviews required by the township have been obtained and approved prior to the issuance of a building permit. And three, that appropriate construction mitigation measures be implemented, which shall include the erection and maintenance of silt fencing located between the proposed building and the shoreline. John Rogers, yea or nay?
Sorry, yay.
Julia Shortreed, yea or nay?
Yay.
Gary Trapp, yea or nay?
Yay.
Chris Woods, yea or nay?
Nay.
Oh, sorry, Chris, I didn't hear that.
Nay.
Nay. Liz Danielson, yea or nay?
Nay. However, it sounds to me like the ayes have it.
That is correct.
So you have your approval. Just keep in mind that that there is an appeal period, so not to take any action for the next 20 days. And I'm sure that you'll have further discussions with both Sean and Greg with respect to your application. Thank you for your time and patience to everyone who attended on behalf of Mr. Webb.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Sean, I guess I'm wondering about our next date for a meeting.
Yeah, so I do have at least one application right now. So just looking at the calendar, the last Friday in March would be the 26th.
Is everyone available on the 26th?
Yes, I am, Gary.
I'm pretty sure I'm okay.
Right on. Oh, we're pretty sure you're okay too.
I'm good. I'm good too.
Yeah, we're okay.
Okay, sounds good.
I'm good.
I'm sorry, John. Could you say that again?
I'm good as well.
Okay.
I'm good as well.
So that concludes our business for today. I'd like to thank you all. If I could have a mover and a seconder for adjournment, please.
Could I ask a question, Madam Chair? Just
Absolutely.
for a little bit of clarification here, and it's not that I object to what we decided. I was really torn on this particular one. The whole idea of it being a new build was the one thing that drew to my attention this setback. And I wondered if we should be looking at the requirements more closely from that perspective. Aesthetics to me is not the issue. The issue is more, what does the bylaw say and what is the bylaw trying to do? And if it can fit in, shouldn't we be pushing for that direction? And I think that's where I was having trouble with this. Had the septic had to go to the front, I would have absolutely said, I'm in favor of the application. But because it didn't have to, I'm that's where I was torn. And I want to just get a feeling from Sean and the bylaw officer. How should we be looking at this?
Yeah, you certainly raised some good points, Chris. Like I summarized in my report, my reason for supporting it was to essentially keep everything to the rear of the property, the rear of the house. So even if he had to push to the 100-foot setback and was able to fit a septic system in still behind the dwelling, you essentially have no more space for accessory buildings to be constructed, which that also with the amount of excavation that would be required if he was to build at the 100-foot setback versus the requested reduction. Just all those different factors were what led me to support the application.
Okay.
I think you'll see that during our discussions about the zoning bylaw that we have under review right now, council's policy, and this goes along in line with the province's direction, is to become, I agree that I do think that this committee needs to be a little bit stronger when it comes to new builds and protection of the lake. You know, we are seeing increasing, as I mentioned at our last meeting, increasing algae blooms and difficulties associated with water quality. And that, you know, for us living in this part of the world is so key and important that, you know, I really, that was my issue with it as well, Chris, that it was a brand new build and it should have been 30 meters back. And there was an ability to fit everything on the property, you know, with the exception of the disturbance to the ground. And that kind of, it made some points to me, but I really appreciate the point that you made about aesthetics, because a lot of the discussion that we heard was related to aesthetics as opposed to planning matters or you know, building requirements. So, you know, I just think that the times are changing, and as is legislation, and we have to work with it as best we can. And it's tough when, you know, when you've got a fellow who wants to do something and you can see that in the past people have done to their neighboring lots exactly what he wants to do. And you know, it's hard to say to that person, but you can't, because things have changed. And that's something that we're just going to have to struggle with. I don't know if you've got anything to add to that, Greg.
Well, I just wanted to, I obviously can't speak to planning, but I can speak to the placement of the septic. And just to put everybody's mind at ease, I mean, the septic would be able to go behind as indicated, but it also, if he was to build at 30 meters, he could apply for the septic in the front yard anyway, because Ontario law allows it to go within 15 meters as of present, until maybe our zoning bylaw may change to reflect a 30-meter setback. But if he submitted an application to my desk saying 15 meters, I would accept it.
That's a very good point, and one well worth understanding, because I must admit that was the biggest issue I had with the whole thing, was that septic.
But, you know, it seems kind of contrary to me that you'd want a house to be 30 meters back from the waterfront, but you'd let a septic be half again closer.
Exactly.
It
Yeah.
seems counterintuitive to me.
Yep, it does to me as well.
Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate the input.
Any other comments or questions before we adjourn? Could I have a mover and a seconder for adjournment then, please? Chris and Julie.
Moved by Chris Woods, second by Julia Shortreed, be it resolved, the Committee of Adjustment hereby adjourns its regular meeting at 1:57 p.m. John Rogers, yea or nay?
Yay.
Julia Shortreed, yea or nay?
Yay.
Gary Trapp, yea or nay?
Yay.
Chris Woods, yea or nay?
Yay.
And Liz Danielson, yea or nay?
Yay.
That's carried.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good weekend.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks.
See you all on
Bye-bye.
the 26th.
Thanks, Liz.